What if I told you that the very traits you despise most about yourself are actually your greatest untapped sources of power? What if the anger you're ashamed of, the jealousy you try to hide, the selfishness you deny are not flaws to be eliminated, but gifts waiting to be unwrapped? Carl Jung, one of the most revolutionary minds in psychology, spent his entire life studying the human psyche and made a discovery that would challenge everything we think we know about personal growth. He found that our darkest qualities, what he called our shadow, contain the very keys to our transformation and authentic power. Jung observed something remarkable in his patients. Those who tried hardest to be perfect, to eliminate their negative traits, remained stuck in cycles of suffering, but those who learned to embrace and integrate their darkness became the most whole, creative, and powerful individuals he had ever encountered. This isn't about becoming a bad person or acting on every dark impulse. This is about understanding a profound psychological truth that could change your entire relationship with yourself. Today, I'm going to reveal the 5 hidden gifts buried within your darkest qualities, gifts that Jung discovered through decades of exploring the human unconscious. You'll learn why your shadow isn't your enemy, but your most loyal ally, waiting to serve your highest evolution. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why the parts of yourself you've been trying to fix might actually be the parts that will set you free. You'll discover how to alchemize your perceived flaws into sources of authentic strength, and why integration, not elimination, is the path to wholeness. But I must warn you, this knowledge comes with a price. Once you see what I'm about to show you, you can never unsee it. Your relationship with your darkness will be forever changed, and with it, your capacity for genuine self-acceptance and personal power. Let's begin with the first hidden gift that exists within your shadow. The first gift hidden in your darkness is the gift of authentic strength. Most people believe that strength means never showing weakness, never feeling afraid, never experiencing doubt. But Jung discovered something far more profound. He found that our greatest strength doesn't come from the absence of weakness, but from the conscious integration of our vulnerabilities. Consider Sarah, a successful executive who spent years projecting an image of invincibility. She worked 18-hour days, never showed emotion in meetings, and prided herself on being tougher than her male colleagues. But beneath this facade, she carried a deep shadow of vulnerability, fear, and exhaustion that she had been denying since childhood. One day, during a particularly intense board meeting, she broke down crying in front of everyone. She was mortified, convinced her career was over. But something unexpected happened. Instead of losing respect, her colleagues began opening up to her in ways they never had before. They shared their own struggles, their fears about the company's direction, their personal challenges. Sarah discovered that her moment of apparent weakness had actually revealed her humanity, and in doing so, had given others permission to be human too. Her leadership became more effective, not less, because she had integrated her shadow of vulnerability. Jung called this phenomenon the transcendent function. When we stop fighting against our perceived weaknesses and instead learn to consciously embrace them, they transform from sources of shame into sources of authentic power. The person who admits their fear becomes truly courageous, not because they feel no fear, but because they act in spite of it. The person who acknowledges their sadness develops genuine compassion. The person who owns their anger discovers their capacity for righteous action. Your shadow contains qualities you've rejected because society, family, or your own ego told you they were unacceptable. But these rejected parts of yourself contain tremendous energy. When you deny them, that energy remains unconscious and often works against you through self-sabotage, projection, or compulsive behaviors. When you integrate them consciously, that same energy becomes available for your growth and creative expression. The psychological consequence of this integration is profound. You stop wasting enormous amounts of energy maintaining a false persona. You become more authentic in your relationships because you're no longer hiding parts of yourself. You develop what Jung called psychological sovereignty, the ability to be yourself regardless of external expectations or judgments. The second gift hidden in your darkness is the gift of creative power. Jung made a startling observation about the relationship between creativity and the shadow. He noticed that the most creative individuals were not those who had eliminated their darkness, but those who had learned to dance with it. Your shadow contains not just the traits you dislike about yourself, but also the wild, untamed, primal aspects of your nature that conventional society has taught you to suppress. Think about the greatest artists, writers, and innovators throughout history. They didn't create their masterpieces by being nice, polite, and following all the rules. They accessed something raw and powerful within themselves, something that often made others uncomfortable. Van Gogh's madness was inseparable from his genius. Frida Kahlo's physical and emotional pain birthed paintings that continue to move souls a century later. Johnny Cash's darkness and struggles with addiction gave his music a depth and authenticity that touched millions. This doesn't mean you need to be tortured to be creative. It means you need to stop being afraid of the untamed aspects of your psyche. Your shadow contains your primal instincts, your raw emotions, your rebellious spirit, your sexual energy, your aggression, your wildness. These are not character flaws to be civilized away. They are sources of creative fire. Jung discovered that when people suppressed these shadow qualities, they often experienced what he called creative blocks. The very energy they were trying to contain was the same energy they needed for creative expression. A writer who suppresses their anger might find themselves unable to write compelling conflict. A business person who denies their rebellious nature might struggle to innovate. An artist who hides their sexuality might create work that feels sterile and disconnected. But when you learn to befriend your shadow, something magical happens. You gain access to the full spectrum of human experience. You can write from the perspective of a villain because you've acknowledged the villain within yourself. You can create passionate art because you've embraced your own passion. You can innovate because you've made friends with your inner rebel. Psychologically, this integration leads to what Jung called the union of opposites. Instead of being split between your acceptable self and your unacceptable self, you become whole. This wholeness is the foundation of authentic creative expression. You're no longer creating from just one small approved part of yourself. You're creating from the totality of who you are. The third gift hidden in your darkness is the gift of emotional intelligence. Most people think emotional intelligence means being calm, positive, and emotionally regulated at all times. But Jung understood something far more nuanced. True emotional intelligence isn't about eliminating negative emotions. It's about developing a conscious relationship with the full spectrum of your emotional landscape, including the emotions you've been taught to fear or suppress. Your shadow contains all the emotions you've learned to judge as unacceptable. Anger, jealousy, hatred, rage, despair, lust, greed, envy. Most personal development teaches you to transcend these emotions, to rise above them, to think positive thoughts until they disappear. But Jung discovered that this approach actually diminishes your emotional intelligence rather than enhancing it. Consider Marcus, a spiritual seeker who spent years meditating, attending workshops, and practicing gratitude, all in an effort to become more positive and eliminate his negative emotions. He became skilled at maintaining a peaceful exterior, but inside, he felt increasingly disconnected from himself and others. His relationships lacked depth because he couldn't access authentic emotion. His work felt meaningless because he had numbed himself to both pain and passion. Everything changed when Marcus began shadow work with a Jungian analyst. Instead of trying to eliminate his anger, He learned to listen to it. He discovered that his anger often pointed toward violations of his values and boundaries. Instead of suppressing his sadness, he allowed it to flow and found that it connected him to his capacity for empathy and compassion. Instead of judging his jealousy, he explored what it revealed about his deepest desires and unmet needs. Jung taught that emotions are not random occurrences, but intelligent responses from your unconscious psyche. Anger tells you when something important to you is being threatened. Sadness helps you process loss and connect you to what matters most. Fear alerts you to potential danger and helps you prepare. Even jealousy, when consciously explored, reveals what you truly value and desire. When you reject these shadow emotions, you lose access to this emotional intelligence. You become like a pilot, flying without instruments, unable to navigate the complexities of human relationships and life decisions. But when you integrate your shadow emotions, you develop what Jung called feeling function, a sophisticated inner guidance system that helps you navigate life with wisdom and authenticity. This doesn't mean acting on every emotion or becoming emotionally reactive. It means developing a conscious relationship with your emotions where you can feel them fully, understand their messages, and choose how to respond. This emotional wholeness makes you more trustworthy to others because they sense your authenticity. It makes you a better friend, partner, and leader because you can meet others in their full emotional reality without judgment or fear. Now, I want to pause here for a moment because something important is happening. If you're still with me, if this is resonating with something deep inside you, it means your own shadow is stirring, recognizing itself in these words. This work we're doing together, this exploration of your darkness, isn't just intellectual, it's transformational, and transformation requires community. I invite you to subscribe to this channel, not just for more content, but because you're becoming part of a community of individuals brave enough to face their shadows and transform their darkness into light. Your journey of integration doesn't have to be walked alone. Share in the comments below one shadow quality you're ready to explore. Let's normalize the conversation about our whole selves, not just the parts we're proud of. The fourth gift hidden in your darkness is the gift of authentic boundaries. Most people struggle with boundaries because they've been taught that setting limits makes them selfish, mean, or unloving. But Jung discovered that healthy boundaries aren't born from your light, polite, people-pleasing persona. They emerge from your integrated shadow, from the parts of yourself that know when to say no, when to fight back, when to protect what's sacred to you. Your shadow contains your inner protector, your fierce guardian, your healthy selfishness. These are not character defects, but essential aspects of psychological health. The person who has never integrated their shadow often becomes a doormat, constantly giving away their energy, time, and resources until they're depleted and resentful. They mistake this depletion for virtue, not realizing they're actually serving no one by not having clear boundaries. Consider Elena, a therapist who prided herself on being endlessly compassionate and available to her clients. She never set limits on session length, often took calls during her personal time, and frequently reduced her fees for clients who claimed financial hardship. She saw herself as deeply caring and spiritual, while viewing therapists who set firm boundaries as cold and money-focused. But Elena's shadow contained her own needs, her anger at being taken advantage of, her desire for financial security, her need for personal time and space. Because she refused to acknowledge these shadow aspects, they began manifesting in unconscious ways. She started arriving late to sessions, making passive-aggressive comments, and feeling secretly resentful toward the very clients she was trying to help. Her work suffered because she couldn't access her authentic feelings and needs. Everything shifted when Eleanor began exploring her shadow in therapy. She discovered that her excessive giving wasn't actually compassion, but a complex defense mechanism rooted in childhood fear of abandonment. She learned to listen to her inner voice that said no, to honor her need for fair compensation, to set limits that actually served both her and her clients better. Jung understood that healthy selfishness is not narcissism, but self-respect. When you integrate your shadow's capacity for self-protection and self-advocacy, you become a person with substance, with edges, with dignity. You stop being nice and start being real. You stop trying to be liked by everyone and start being respected by those who matter. This integration creates what Jung called psychological differentiation. You become able to distinguish between your needs and others' needs, between your emotions and others' emotions, between your responsibilities and others' responsibilities. This clarity makes you more helpful to others, not less, because you're operating from a place of fullness rather than depletion. People often fear that integrating their shadow will make them mean or selfish, but the opposite is true. When you own your capacity for selfishness consciously, you become more genuinely generous because your giving comes from choice rather than compulsion. When you acknowledge your capacity for anger, you become more authentically kind because your kindness isn't just a mask for unexpressed rage. The fifth and most profound gift hidden in your darkness is the gift of wholeness and self-acceptance. This is the ultimate goal of Jung's individuation process, the journey toward becoming who you truly are rather than who you think you should be. Most people spend their entire lives in what Jung called the first half of life, building an ego, achieving success, and creating a persona that wins approval from others. But the real work begins when you're ready to face your shadow and integrate all aspects of yourself into a unified whole. Your shadow doesn't just contain negative traits, it also holds positive qualities that you've disowned because they didn't fit your self-image or because others couldn't tolerate them. Perhaps you've hidden your intelligence because it threatened others. Maybe you've suppressed your leadership abilities because you were taught that being powerful was wrong. Your shadow might contain your capacity for joy, for spontaneity, for sensuality, for confidence, all exiled because they didn't match the image you learned you needed to project to be loved and accepted. True wholeness comes when you can embrace the full spectrum of who you are. Jung called this the union of opposites, the marriage of light and dark within your own psyche. You become someone who can be both strong and vulnerable, both independent and connected, both assertive and receptive, both serious and playful. You stop being a caricature of yourself and become a complete human being. This integration has profound psychological and spiritual consequences. You stop projecting your disowned qualities onto others. Instead of being triggered by people who express traits you've rejected in yourself, you become curious about what they might teach you. You stop looking for others to complete you because you become complete within yourself. You develop what Jung called authentic self-love, not the narcissistic kind that inflates the ego, but the mature kind that accepts the totality of who you are. When you achieve this level of integration, something magical happens in your relationships because you're no longer hiding parts of yourself. Others feel permission to be whole around you too. You become a space where others can be authentic because you've modeled that authenticity yourself. Your presence becomes healing because you've stopped dividing yourself and others into good and bad, acceptable and unacceptable. But here's what Jung discovered that might surprise you. This integration work is never finished. The shadow isn't something you conquer once and move beyond. It's a living, breathing part of your psyche that continues to evolve as you grow. New aspects of yourself will emerge that challenge your current self-image. Life will present you with experiences that reveal previously unknown facets of your shadow. This isn't a failure. It's the very essence of being alive and growing. The journey toward wholeness requires enormous courage because it means giving up the fantasy of being perfect, the dream of being purely good, the illusion that you can control how others see you. It means accepting that you're gloriously, messily, completely human. It means trading the prison of perfection for the freedom of authenticity. But this is where the deepest gift lies. When you stop trying to be perfect and start learning to be whole, you discover something that all the self-improvement in the world cannot give you: unconditional self-acceptance. You realize that your worth isn't based on being flawless, but on being real. You understand that your power doesn't come from having no shadow, but from having a conscious relationship with your shadow. This realization is perhaps Jung's greatest gift to humanity. The understanding that we don't need to be fixed because we were never broken. We need to be integrated because we were never meant to be partial. The very things we've been trying to eliminate about ourselves are often the keys to our liberation. As we come to the end of this exploration, I want you to consider something profound. Right now, as you're listening to these words, your shadow is listening too. The parts of yourself you've kept hidden, the qualities you've judged, the aspects you've rejected, they're all present in this moment, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to be welcomed home. Jung believed that the goal of human life wasn't to become perfect, but to become whole. Not to eliminate our darkness, but to bring it into consciousness where it can serve our highest evolution. He saw that the very qualities we're most ashamed of often contain the seeds of our greatest gifts. The person who learns to channel their anger becomes a powerful advocate for justice. The one who owns their selfishness becomes capable of healthy self-care. The individual who embraces their darkness becomes a beacon of authentic light. This doesn't mean becoming self-indulgent or harmful to others. It means becoming conscious, integrated, and whole. It means developing what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold paradox and complexity without needing to resolve everything into simple categories of good and bad. Your shadow work is not just personal, it's collective. When you stop projecting your darkness onto others, you contribute to healing the world's divisions. When you own your capacity for both creation and destruction, both love and hatred, both wisdom and foolishness, you become part of the solution to humanity's tendency to split into us and them, good and evil, light and dark. The invitation before you now is both simple and profound: to begin a conscious relationship with your shadow. Start small. Notice when you judge others harshly and ask yourself what quality in them might be reflecting something you've rejected in yourself. Pay attention to your dreams. As Jung discovered, they often reveal shadow content. Explore your projections, the qualities you either idealize or despise in others. Remember that shadow work isn't about becoming a different person. It's about becoming more fully the person you already are. It's about retrieving the lost parts of yourself and integrating them into a more complete and authentic way of being. Your darkness isn't your enemy. It never was. It's been waiting patiently for you to recognize it, to welcome it, to discover the gifts it's been guarding all along. The very qualities you've been trying to fix might actually be the ones that will set you free. Your shadow isn't the problem. Your relationship with your shadow is the opportunity. The path of individuation, the journey toward wholeness, is not for the faint of heart. It requires giving up the comfortable illusions of who you think you should be in favor of the sometimes uncomfortable truth of who you actually are. But on the other side of this surrender lies something precious beyond measure: the capacity to love yourself fully, to accept others completely, and to live with an authenticity that touches everyone around you. Your shadow is calling. The question is, are you ready to answer?